Arriving at the high-rise condo, I spoke to the concierge and was handed the keys to my apartment. Taking the elevator for the upper floors, I reached the top floor apartment.
Wow, this is amazing.
My sister-in-law was the first to dash in, exclaiming joyfully as she almost danced. "All right, let's get unpacked." I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, I became frustrated. The movers placed the boxes where I directed, and I started unpacking by myself.
I'm taking the spacious 330 square foot room.
And Emily gets the 66 square foot storage room, right?
My in-laws decided on the room assignments without consulting me, but I ignored them and kept working.
This place is really wonderful.
It's perfect for our final home.
We're lucky.
Jake and my in-laws shared wide grins, exchanging these sentiments.
Living in a place like this feels like a dream.
My sister-in-law Mary said, tearing up. It was about time to reveal the truth. "Huh? Whose house are you talking about?"
What?
"My name is Emily Cooper. I'm 32 years old. I'm a freelance illustrator. I originally worked for a major publishing company, but went independent and now mainly take on jobs from my old company while also starting to work as a children's book author. I married my husband, Jake, 2 years ago, and we began living together in the condo I own. The reason we live here is that this place belongs to me, and Jake moved in from his rental apartment. When I was young, my parents died in a car accident. After that, I was raised by my grandparents, and after graduating from college and starting a job, I bought this condo. I used the compensation and insurance money from my parents' accident for the payment. My grandparents didn't touch that money, raised me, and gave it to me to use for myself when I graduated from college. I bought this place because my grandparents moved into a nursing home. My grandparents had reserved a place in a facility for themselves once they finished raising me. They didn't want me to bear the burden of caregiving. After thinking it over, I bought this condo because it was a direct train ride to my job and convenient for visiting my grandparents' facility. My grandparents said there were better ways to use the money, but I believed this was the best option. I've lived here for almost 10 years now. The 10 years with my grandparents nearly matched the 10 years before I lost my parents. I've spent about a third of my life here. It's a home I have a fair amount of attachment to. I met Jake at a friend's wedding reception. Jake was a colleague of my college friend's husband. There were many of us the same age, and we started hanging out together after that. Several couples formed and a few even got married. Jake and I were one of those couples. Jake was cheerful and always lightened the mood. I was attracted to him from the first meeting. I admired his cheerful nature, which was unlike my own, and thought he was a wonderful person. However, that was only Jake's public face, and I soon learned his true nature after our marriage. Jake was a very gentlemanly person during our relationship, but was the type of person who didn't feed the fish he caught. No, it was worse than that. He was the type to exploit the caught fish.
I'm living in your house, so you cover the living expenses.
What do you mean?
Even if I wasn't living here, the costs would be the same, right? So you keep covering what you've been covering. Doesn't that make sense?
Sure, my condo is fully paid off with no remaining loan. But there are still management fees, repair reserves, and property taxes. I also pay for parking since we have a car.
So, those are expenses you'd pay even if I wasn't here, right?
That's true, but
Then there's no problem if you keep paying them as you have been. right?
It seemed logical at first glance, but it was still wrong. But Jake, you're going to be living here too, and we agreed to split the living expenses, right? I'd really appreciate it if you could contribute. When I said that, Jake's eyes narrowed sharply, and he snapped back.
You're such a money-grubbing woman. I never thought you'd be such a miser.
I was too shocked to respond. From my perspective, it was natural for us to be equals as a couple going forward. I assumed he'd naturally share the expenses of the home we were going to live in together.
I'm not saying I won't contribute a single cent. I'll cover half of what I use. But you're the owner of this house, right?
In other words, since the property belongs to me, the expenses should be my responsibility.
I'll cover my other expenses myself. Isn't that good enough?
Reluctantly, I agreed to his demands. At first, Jake did pay half of the living expenses as he said he would, but only the amounts I billed him for. This month's electric bill was this much.
That's quite high. Are you wasting electricity working from home?
I had quit my job during our dating period and started working as a freelance illustrator. While I occasionally went out for meetings, most of my work was done at home.
That seems unfair.
Jake first brought up the utility bills. Unfair? What do you mean?
I work outside almost all day. Why should I pay for the electricity you use working from home?
What a ridiculous argument. I was too dumbfounded to respond.
I only use a little electricity when I'm home before bed, so I shouldn't have to pay half.
Jake said this and began paying only a fraction of the utilities. He used the same logic for gas and water bills. Even so, I tolerated it at that time. Indeed, Jake was home only briefly each day. While utility costs had certainly increased with one more person, it was impossible to pinpoint exactly who used what amount. Despite his complaints, Jake did share the living expenses, so I quietly accepted his terms. Looking back now, I realize how foolish I was. But at the time, I thought it was the best way to avoid conflict early in our marriage. Rather than arguing about something weird at the start of our marriage, I thought it was better to endure this and have a peaceful married life. That's the conclusion I came to. Except for the money issue, Jake was the same cheerful and fun person he was before we got married. Of course, the money issue always lingered in the back of my mind, but I never had financial difficulties even without Jake's contribution, and I valued our happy times together more. However, those supposedly happy times gradually became precarious.
Another overtime. Seriously, they need to give me a break.
Jake said, looking annoyed, and started coming home later. Isn't all this overtime taking a toll on your health? The guidelines say working more than a certain number of hours a month is dangerous. According to the Department of Labor, it should be under 45 hours a month.
You don't get it. Those numbers are just for show. A top-notch salesperson doesn't only work the hours they clock in.
Jake mocked and told me that.
You've pulled all-nighters to meet deadlines, right, Emily?
Yes, that's true.
That's what I mean. Don't be fooled by surface numbers.
I graduated from an art university and started working as an illustrator. So, I really don't know anything about sales jobs. When Jake put it that way, I had no choice but to believe him. Okay, but please don't overdo it.
I got it. You're so kind, Emily. I won't push myself too hard.
Jake would say this while gently holding my shoulder. I tried to believe in Jake's kindness. as if believing was the only way to keep my peace of mind. A year passed with Jake gradually betraying me. When people are given a lot of pain at once, they can react, but when it's given little by little, they eventually become numb. Jake's betrayals accumulated. Even though it had grown quite large by then, I was just putting up with it a little. That's how I spent my days. In other words, I turned a blind eye and lived in peace. Then suddenly, a big event happened.
My family is coming over soon. Is that okay?
One morning, Jake suddenly said this. You mean Brian and Kate?
And my sister too.
I had visited Jake's parents' house once before we got married. Jake's parents lived in a small, old house in the countryside. The house was quite old, with various parts showing signs of age, but Jake's parents, Brian and Kate, lived there alone. At that time, Jake's sister, Mary, had already married and moved out, so I couldn't meet her. I had contacted her, but she only sent a message saying, I can't make it due to plans. Please give my regards. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, just took some photos, so I only met Jake's parents that one time. Our friends threw us a celebratory party, but I didn't get to meet Mary or any of Jake's other relatives. Since I didn't have much interaction with my own relatives, I didn't find it particularly strange. Now, Jake's family was suddenly coming over. It's been a year since we got married, so it's not odd that they'd want to check in. I agreed to Jake's request without any doubts. A week later, Jake's family arrived at our house as planned.
This is Jake's place? It's not very spacious, is it?
That was the first thing Jake's family said upon entering. Of course, it's not very spacious. Originally, I bought this house for myself. It's a 3-bedroom condo with a large living and dining area. One room is mostly a guest room, and I use the remaining 2 rooms as my workspace and bedroom. When Jake started living here, he wanted a space to work from home too, so I gave up my workspace for his study, and now I work in the living room. It's plenty of space for the 2 of us, and we have no inconveniences. As I was thinking this, Kate entered, followed by Mary, whom I was meeting for the first time.
Really, it's smaller than I thought. Are we all going to live here?
It's small, but bear with it. They say any place becomes home if you live there long enough, right?
Well, it's better than nothing. I'll put up with it.
Put up with it? How long do they plan on staying? As I was vaguely pondering this, Jake gave a command in an irritated tone.
Hey, what are you daydreaming about? Hurry up and carry Dad's stuff.
What? Oh, sorry. So, which luggage is theirs? If they were just staying for a bit, it should be a duffel bag, right? I thought and looked around inside the entrance, but there was nothing.
What are you looking at? Look at outside.
I quickly glanced out into the hallway and saw about 10 cardboard boxes wrapped up. Cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house. I didn't understand, but leaving these boxes in the hallway would be a nuisance to the other residents. Luckily, the boxes weren't too heavy, and I managed to bring them all into the living room by myself. The living and dining area is quite large, and though the boxes were in the way, I found space to stack them without much trouble. During this time, Jake and his family sat chatting.
Once you've finished moving the boxes, make some tea. Everyone's tired.
The situation was so overwhelming that I moved reflexively to Jake's words without thinking.
She's really an unhelpful wife.
The future looks bleak.
I'm sleeping in this room.
While I was still trying to figure things out and making tea, Mary declared our bedroom as hers.
Oh, that's fine. I'll sleep in the guest room with Mom and Dad.
It'll be nice to sleep with Jake again after so long.
Family time without outsiders.
Jake and his family acted like I didn't exist, enjoying their reunion. My home has a bedroom, a guest room, and what is now Jake's study, which was my workspace. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long is this situation going to last? People can't think straight when faced with situations far beyond their normal understanding. While I was in a daze, everything was decided. From that moment on, the worst period of my life began.
Hey, when's dinner?
Sorry, I'm preparing it now.
You're so slow. I can't believe Jake puts up with you.
Jake's family lazed around the house all day, doing nothing. And they treated me like a servant. At first, I endured it, thinking it was just a few days and trying to be a good wife. But as I listened to Jake and his family talk, I realized they intended to stay indefinitely, and I snapped awake. Here's the story in summary. Jake's family had fled from their hometown. Why? Because Mary had come back after a divorce. The divorce was due to Mary's infidelity. She had affairs with multiple men. When all of this came to light, both her ex-husband and the wives of her lovers demanded compensation, which she couldn't pay, so they fled here. Jake had told me their family home was owned, but that was a lie. Originally, that house belonged to Kate's parents. Jake's parents, who had no means of support, moved in with them. After Kate's parents passed away, they continued to stay there. The true owner was Kate's brother, who had been telling them to leave for years, but they stayed, using their residency rights as leverage. Kate's brother wanted them out, but since he had his own house, he couldn't forcefully evict his sister's family, so he kept asking them to leave without taking further action. So, when Mary returned with a mountain of compensation debt, Jake's parents decided to sell their house to raise money. Kate's brother was understandably furious when he found out. He threatened legal action, so they packed as much as they could and fled to our place. Those 10 cardboard boxes were all they could carry. In other words, the boxes I struggled to bring into the house on the day they arrived contained all of Jake's family's possessions. I didn't know what was inside and didn't want to know, but it seemed there was nothing of real value. All things considered, Jake's family had come to us penniless, and from now on, they will live by parasitizing us. Jake, being miraculously smart and good at studying, graduated from college on a scholarship. To outsiders, he seemed like a charming young man from a good family. He got a job at a reputable company, met me, and got married. I couldn't see through Jake's true nature or his family's reality. I was already alone without my parents. I had a job and owned a house. To Jake, I must have seemed like an easy target. No way. Now that I knew everything, I wasn't going to be a passive slave. I wouldn't let such a worthless family take advantage of me. I began thinking about how to fight back and started acting the next day. First, I needed to play it cool. I couldn't let Jake or his family know about my plans. I'd lull them into a false sense of security and strike when they least expected it. Just as they had shown up unexpectedly, so would I take action. I pretended to go along with everything Jake's family said for about a week. Then one day, Mary said to me,
Give me some money.
She said this and thrust her open right hand toward me. How shamelessly direct. I was annoyed, but I decided not to resist for now, so I handed Mary a few bills.
That's it? Don't you have more?
Well, it's so sudden that I don't have any cash on me right now.
Then a card will do.
No way. If I handed over my card, who knows how they would use it? I can't lend you my card. I'll go to the bank tomorrow and withdraw some cash, so please wait until then. I somehow managed to silence my complaining in-laws with this promise. No matter what, I wouldn't give them my card. That night, when Jake got home, he complained about it.
You should have just lent them your card. You're so stingy with money.
What a thing to say, I thought, but I had my reasons, so I decided to apologize. I'm sorry. I thought there might be a problem if something happened with the card.
What do you mean by something?
I was too afraid to give it to Mary if she got arrested for fraud by using a card with a different name. Jake seemed to accept this explanation.
Then make a family card for my mom and dad. I'm counting on you.
All right, I replied, but I had no intention of making one. About a month later, Jake asked me about the family card. His family had asked me for money a few times, which was inconvenient, so they probably urged Jake to check on the card. I'm sorry, it seems like I can't get one, I said, pretending to be disappointed. I hadn't applied for a family card at all, and I wasn't disappointed in the least.
Why not?
They said Mary is considered relatives, not family. Just temporarily living here isn't enough. Jake's family had barged in without permission and hadn't done any paperwork to officially live with us. They haven't transferred their residence registration, so they don't have any legal status here.
Is that so?
Jake seemed to accept this explanation, albeit reluctantly.
Then just transfer the residency registration.
Right, since we're going to live here anyway.
Go through the procedure right away.
Audaciously, they ordered me to handle the paperwork. Well, about that, I think this house is a bit too small for everyone to live in permanently.
Now that you mention it, you're right.
Maybe that's why Jake hasn't been coming home much lately. When I said that, Jake looked a bit annoyed.
I'm staying at a hotel because of all the overtime.
Oh, I see. Thanks for your hard work. So, I was thinking, why don't we move out of this place? Jake and his family were stunned by my suggestion. This house was originally bought for me to live alone, and while it's fine for Jake and me, it's a bit too cramped now.
That's true.
Look at this. Wouldn't you like to live in a place like this? I showed them the brochure of my new house. It was a brochure for a high-rise condo that's being built in the new downtown area. It had photos of the top-floor apartment. It looked spacious, with large windows offering a view of the city below.
How did you get a place in a condo like this?
I thought the current place was too cramped, so I decided to go for it. I sold our current place and added my parents' inheritance and savings to buy it.
That's great. This place isn't bad, but the new one is definitely better.
Mary and Jake, who had been looking skeptical, quickly changed their tune upon hearing that it was already paid for.
You're finally showing some sense. I'm starting to see you in a new light.
That's right. I might just acknowledge you as my daughter-in-law.
Jake's parents nodded and smiled at each other. And just like that, the moving plans were settled smoothly. About a month later, the moving day finally arrived. It was a bit sad to say goodbye to the home I had lived in for so many years, but this was for a brighter future. After loading our belongings onto 2 trucks, we headed to our destination in 2 taxis. Arriving at the high-rise condo, I spoke to the concierge and was handed the keys to my apartment. Taking the elevator for the upper floors, we reached the top floor apartment.
Wow, this is amazing.
Mary was the first to burst through the open door, exclaiming and almost dancing. All right, let's get everything unpacked. I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, but it still made me angry. The movers placed the boxes where I directed, and I started unpacking by myself.
I'll take the spacious 330 square foot room.
And Emily gets the 66 square foot storage room, right?
My in-laws decided the room assignments on their own, but I ignored them and kept working.
This place is really wonderful.
It's perfect for our final home.
We're lucky.
Jake and his family exchanged these sentiments with broad smiles.
Living in a place like this feels like a dream.
Mary said, tearing up. It was about time to reveal the truth. Huh? Whose house are you talking about?
What?
It was the perfect moment to show my in-laws the reality. Why do you think you can live here?
What are you talking about? This is our new home. Of course, we're going to live here.
What? I feigned exaggerated surprise. This isn't your house. I bought this place to live with my grandparents.
You asked if we wanted to live in a place like this.
Mary screeched. Yes, I did ask that, but I never said you could live here. And that's the truth. I never said they could move in. Who would want to live with people like this forever? So you all need to leave right away. I'm the owner of this house, and the owner is telling you to leave. Please comply before things get messy.
Are you kidding me?
Jake stomped his foot loudly, his face red with anger.
You should just shut up and do what I say. My family and I are living in this house. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah, get out.
That's right. Get out.
Jake and his family crowded around, trying to force me out. I used the direct intercom on the wall to contact the concierge. Excuse me, there are some strange people in my house who won't leave. They're trying to kick me out. Please come immediately. As soon as I finished speaking, a siren blared throughout the room.
What the hell?
Turn it off.
Stop that noise.
The security guards quickly arrived in response to the call. As expected of a high-end condo. These are the building security guards. If you don't leave, I'll call the police next. Hearing the guard's voice through the intercom at the entrance, Jake's family started to panic. They realized I wasn't bluffing. The security guards arrived, and Jake's family started begging, practically on their knees, asking to explain their side. I decided to hear them out. I was curious about what Jake had told them. Jake had described me to his family as a pitiful woman with no relatives. She can't live without me, so I'm letting her stay here. He also said, feel free to use her however you want. She's just like a housemaid. I showed some mercy to the family who had given me such valuable testimony. When I gave them money, I made them sign a paper noting the amount. I mean, there's IOUs. I need a proper receipt to give to Jake. Otherwise, he'll get mad at me. I'll give you as much as you need if you write it down. Knowing they could get money as long as they signed the paper, Jake's family eagerly wrote their signatures. Thanks to this, I had proof of how much I had lent them. I considered collecting from Jake's family, but they clearly couldn't pay it back, so it made more sense to get it from Jake and kick them out of the condo. Thanks for helping out with this. If you leave now, I'll forget about this. But if you come back, you'll have to pay it all back. I waived the IOUs, and Jake's family finally gave up and left.
I'm Emily's husband. I have the right to live here. I'm not leaving.
Jake stubbornly refused to move. If that's how he wants to play it, let's settle this here. All right, let's talk. But if you do something crazy, I'll call the guards right back. I thanked the guards and asked them to leave for now.
Why are you doing this? Do you hate my family that much?
Of course, they barged in here, tricked me, and treated me like a slave. I said sharply to Jake.
Fine. If you hate them that much, I'll ask my parents to leave. But I can stay, right?
Unbelievable. He was willing to abandon his family just to stay here. What a pathetic man. No, you need to leave too.
Why? We're married.
I handed him a file.
What's this?
Jake turned pale as he looked inside. She's a lovely young lady. I've heard she's been living with you half the week recently. The file contained evidence of Jake's affair. There were countless photos of them holding hands and entering hotels together. Jake had started seeing her right after we got married. You told her you'd leave me and move into the condo with her. That's what you said.
That's a lie. Who told you that?
I turned on the voice recorder I was holding. The voice of Jake's mistress played, and Jake froze. It was evidence provided by the private investigator I hired. The investigator approached the woman and kindly informed her that Jake was married, recording her reaction. The woman proudly said, Jake is going through a divorce, and once he kicks out his ex-wife, we're going to live together in his condo. Jake had told his mistress, I want to separate, but my wife refuses to agree to the divorce. Once she's exhausted from being mistreated by my family, she'll leave quietly. The mistress laughed, saying, Jake loves only me. His relationship with his wife is completely over. True love will win in the end. But when she realized she was talking to a private investigator, she panicked and tried to protect herself. She pleaded, I was deceived by Jake too. I honestly believed their marriage was over. I'll tell you everything, just please don't ask for compensation. The investigator asked me what to do, and I told him to say it depended on what she told us. She ended up spilling everything, including details we hadn't even asked for. The entire exchange was recorded. So much for true love. Well, looks like I've got all the evidence. This could result in a hefty alimony. Jake collapsed onto the floor. I've sent your belongings to your mistress's apartment. You can live there starting today. Now, get out. I contacted the concierge again and had Jake, who was still limp with shock, escorted out. As promised, I spared the mistress from paying alimony. She had provided crucial testimony that proved Jake's malicious behavior. Thanks to her, I managed to get a substantial alimony payment from Jake. It was more than enough to forgive her. However, I did inform her parents and employer about the affair. I hadn't promised not to tell anyone, so I felt free to share the information. The mistress was Jake's junior colleague. Their work together brought them closer. It could have been a nice story if he hadn't been married. What kind of employee training do you provide over there? Thanks to it, I ended up getting divorced. When I filed a complaint with the company, they apologized for their lack of oversight. Worried about their reputation, the company forced the woman to resign under the guise of a voluntary departure, and Jake was demoted and transferred from the headquarters to a subsidiary. The two had been sneaking off to hotels during their work hours, pretending they were on business trips, and even taking vacations together. Given the damage they caused to the company, such consequences were only natural. Rumor has it that Jake's family is now actually living with the woman in her apartment.
You caused all of this. Take responsibility.
Jake and the woman are reportedly squatting in her apartment, blaming her for their predicament. Jake and the woman took out loans to pay me alimony. Now they're living on the edge, scraping by to pay off their debts. It's about time they get fed up and kick Jake's family out. Jake thought of me as a pitiful woman burdened with grandparents in a nursing home, but that's not quite the truth. My grandparents are indeed in a facility, but it's a luxurious one where wealthy people live in comfort. They used to run a business, intending to pass it on to my parents, but after they passed away young, my grandparents retired and entrusted the business to a reliable person. This happened the year I graduated from college. I had always loved drawing since I was a child and had won numerous awards. Since I had expressed my desire to pursue my career in art, my grandparents didn't force me to take over the business. They wanted me to live freely, which is why they chose to move into that facility. I got a job related to art as I had wished, and now I've started to become known as a children's book author. One of my picture books became a huge hit, and now I'm somewhat of a celebrity. Since separating from Jake, I feel like my luck has taken a turn for the better. I bet he's regretting it now. I used the money from selling the condo, my parents' inheritance, and book royalties to buy that high-rise condo. I wanted to live with my grandparents again while they're still healthy. Of course, I'll keep the nursing home as well. It'll be necessary when one of them can no longer move around freely and needs extensive care. But for now, they're both still energetic. Thanks to my book's success, I can finally repay my grandparents. We'll be able to live happily together for a while longer. I may have faced some hardship due to getting involved with a man like ex-husband, but my future looks bright and promising.